The Central Bank of Nigeria has done a 180 on crypto assets in the country and asked banks to disregard its earlier ban on crypto transactions, essentially noting that current trends globally have shown the need for crypto regulation. This is according to a CBN circular signed by the bank's Director of Financial Policy and Regulation Department, Haruna Mustafa. Although the CBN emphasized that Nigerian banks and financial institutions are still prohibited from holding, trading, or transacting in crypto assets from their accounts, the new guidelines will allow virtual asset service providers, or VASP, which include cryptocurrencies and crypto assets organizations, to now open accounts with Nigerian banks. Joining me now is Ola Atose. He's the CEO of KoinKoin Exchange. Ola, Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for taking some time out of this special day to spend it with us here on Business Edge.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you too, Tolu, and thank you for having me.
So let's take a trip down memory lane. It was in February of 2021 that the CBN issued a circular to deposit money banks, non-bank institutions, financial institutions that is, and of course OFIs to close accounts of persons or entities involved in cryptocurrency transactions within their systems. It cited concerns over money laundering, terrorism financing, cybercrime, and even the volatility of cryptocurrencies as the reasons for the ban. And the ban would have been 3 years in just about 2 months. So have the concerns of the CBN been addressed somehow to explain this 180-degree turn?
I think, as we've discussed on previous occasions, Tolu, we have always invited the central bank to regulate this space. As you mentioned, virtual asset service providers have been around, have been operating. There was a lot of concern earlier on, a lot of exchanges would go underground. A lot of them pivoted to the sort of P2P, which didn't work very well. And I think the central bank's concern around AML, the money laundering aspect or lack thereof with some of these VASPs, as you call them, has always been an issue. And I think the CBN finally come around in recognizing what the rest of the world is doing in regulating, virtual asset service providers in line with the FATF. And they've sort of recognized that, hey, they need to catch up. There's a need to regulate, these exchanges, some which are still sort of operating in Nigeria. I, for one, welcome that. I think the CBN is on the right track. There are a number of things which can be done in line with traditional finance as it stands to regulate the space. And I think it is correct to identify, crypto exchanges, crypto asset, companies as financial institutions.
All right, so for some clarity here, the circular says banks and other financial institutions are still prohibited from holding, trading, and or transacting in virtual currencies on their accounts or in their domains, whatever it may be. So what exactly is changing? So what's changing is that we're bringing on these virtual asset service providers to handle cryptocurrencies, but keeping those assets or keeping banks and financial institutions away from handling, but they can just be a holding space. Sort of clear that up for us, Ola.
I think from what I gather is central bank would still look to register and onboard virtual asset service providers as companies at some point. And the expectation is there will be some sort of registration process, for all digital asset service providers. So the expectation is until such has actually happened, banks perhaps would have to register if they have interest in providing such services. And I think the CBN would still like to see, how some of the, unregistered tokens or tokens, which are perhaps not serving immediately, the Nigerian government's, intentions with regards to virtual assets, not just, crypto, so to speak, but also to do with perhaps the CBDC or other stable coins, if you like. So I still think there's some questions which the central bank wants to answer before perhaps giving access, to maybe banks, to sort of do it in a controlled fashion, if you like. But again, I think the central bank's on the, they're certainly on the right tick here, and I think the approach with regards to regulating the space is something that we've wanted for a while. And we're certainly glad to see that central banks are, on the right track.
So something else that the circular references, and we've talked a lot about sort of the global trends around cryptocurrencies, and it references current global trends that show that there is need to regulate the activities of virtual service providers, including cryptocurrencies and crypto assets. So, in the past 2 years plus, in which this ban has effectively been in place from the CBN, what has changed globally when it comes to the acceptance of cryptocurrencies? And what do you think are some of the trends that the CBN has been looking at and said, okay, we need to keep abreast of this. We need to also keep up to date, and we can't freeze this out of our system forever. We need to start seeing a situation where we're opening the door and working to see regulation as we're seeing around the world.
I think that question answers itself. A lot of countries around the world, the United Kingdom, if you look at Singapore, you look at Hong Kong, you look at a number of different countries in Europe, they all have some sort of directive and regulatory approach on virtual assets. Even Europe's ESMA, is coming up with MiCA, which is its own form of regulation for crypto assets. So the whole world at large is sort of, stepping up and putting things in place to ensure that they can actually, regulate crypto. So I think in line with that, the Nigerian establishment, the central bank, are sort of seeing that, hey, there's a lot of crypto activity going on. It does sort of make sense for us to put our arms around that, around the sort of virtual asset institutions, if you like, and regulate them in line with what we already do in the traditional finance space. I think one of the concerns were valid when the central bank, placed the restriction on crypto assets. A lot of those concerns, as you mentioned, are to do with terrorist financing, money laundering, and the likes, and the volatility, indeed, of some investment-grade crypto. So I think now we're in a position whereby, the central bank recognizes all this, but more so, they recognize the need to regulate it. And I think one of the points we should also mention is the foreign exchange space in Nigeria. We've had a lot of volatility in the naira. There is a lot of understanding that, crypto assets, for example, with stable coins, may serve as a tool to actually help solve, this age-old problem of the different markets, foreign exchange markets we have in Nigeria. So I think the central bank, again, is on the right track. They're doing the right thing, and they are in a position at this point, I believe, to not just regulate, but also use some of the tools we have, this distributed ledger technology, stable coins, and whatnot, to actually solve existing issues, with the currency, the naira, Nigerian naira, its stability. And perhaps going forward, we will see more specifically around foreign exchange and what these virtual asset services can do to solve that problem.
So I want to go deeper a bit into the guidelines, because in reference to the guidelines, the CBN did mention the Securities and Exchange Commission's rules that were issued in May 2022 on digital assets and VAS. Are these rules sufficient? Ola, I ask that because it feels like we're opening a door here, a door that we may not be so ready to contain what comes out. Not necessarily a Pandora's box, but we are opening a door. And it's a really important door that we're opening. One, we want to keep abreast of where the world is moving, but we've seen the financial institutions in Nigeria have struggles with KYC. We've seen the conversation around, of course, the concerns around money laundering and terrorism financing. Are the rules we see in place currently and the guidelines, are they sufficient for what is coming to the economy, for what the regulator, the CBN, is going to really have to do and be tight and tough on when it comes to even just opening up for the WASP? Do you think we have sufficient guidelines in place?
Well, I think other jurisdictions around the world have actually found a way to solve these problems. And there are a number of things, an entire framework which could be put in place. Some of what we have originally in traditional finance, as I've mentioned, but also some things which are unique, to virtual assets. So there are a number of things that the central bank can do with regards to sort of, putting a blanket over, sort of a blanket of controls, a framework around, how they can control, who has access to virtual assets, some sort of travel rule, if you wish, around, how they'll travel, how the assets are moved, traded, or exchanged between individuals or entities. So there are a number of things that the central bank can actually do. And what's actually good about them doing it at this point is there's been some maturity in the virtual asset space. There's a lot more controls, in terms of compliance in and of itself, how we manage risk around virtual assets, what we can do to ensure It's a sort of the ecosystem of trading is more, on par with the traditional finance to ensure the safety limits are in place. And I think the central bank, with its current guidelines, yes, it's opened the door to it, but again, there's been some maturity in the space, and I'm certainly very confident, given what we're doing at KoinKoin, that there are a number of ways by which we can control sort of the access to virtual assets, but at the same time ensure that the ecosystem is safe for everyone to be involved in. By everyone, I mean not just the individuals or companies or private or public entities, but the entire country of Nigeria. There are a lot of benefits, for the nation, and I think controlled access within reason will certainly help everyone in terms of Nigeria and Nigerians. But again, we don't know exactly. I mean, looking at those guidelines, as you mentioned, a lot of it has been set up in a sort of traditional way in terms of registering companies, knowing who those companies are, and then giving them access to bank accounts. But again, it's early days. I think there'll be a lot more to come. And again, a lot of that is going to be due to some of the maturity, as I say, we've seen that companies such as ours now have, given the number of years we've been in the space and the understanding that we have on what needs to be done to ensure that the effective controls are in place, not to protect ourselves as a company, but also to protect our users.
So let me ask, because we're calling this that Nigeria is lifting the ban on crypto transactions, but there is still a ban in effect for financial money institutions and deposit money banks. So can we say this is a total lifting of restriction, or is a partial lifting of restrictions, or what do we call it? Because it seems to come down to syntax, not to give the viewers an idea of what is not. What do you consider this move by the CBN to be, Ola?
I think it's a very bold move. I would be forced to agree with you that the central bank has made this move all of a sudden. But at the same time, I believe there's a plan in place. Again, what's in those guidelines, it feels like it's partial. The banks in and of themselves won't be allowed to offer these products, virtual asset services for the time being. But the companies such as ourselves that are already registered in Nigeria, that are able to provide these services in Nigeria, we will go through, the relevant registration process to ensure that we have bank accounts and we're able to offer our services, to the Nigerian populace. And I think, the controls we have, some of the education we can give the central bank itself and any other, public body, we will be able to do so to ensure that there's, protection for Nigerians who want to have access to digital assets, but at the same time, there's value for Nigeria in how we're registered and the necessary taxes that we would have to pay and everything else. So I think if it's being done properly, which I feel it is, and VASPs now come on as financial institutions, then there will be a lot of valid benefits for Nigeria. Most especially, as we've mentioned in the past, some sort of inclusion in the banking space, financial inclusion for those who do not have access to bank accounts, but also a lot of assistance in the foreign exchange space, which, as I've mentioned, has moved heavily into this virtual asset space. And I think this would really help the central bank's bottom line with regards to getting the naira under some sort of control. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I would say one step at a time. We're certainly here to assist and help with the central bank's initiative, and we can provide sort of access to the knowledge we have to the central bank to ensure, that our innovation assists the central bank ultimately with what they wish to achieve, for Nigeria and Nigerians.
Okay, so I want to expand on your last answer, because you talked about financial inclusion being one of the positives, as well as foreign exchange. So what do you see as the impact to the economy, keeping in mind that there are still concerns about money laundering, as I mentioned earlier, terrorism financing, the volatility associated with cryptos, and even issues around consumer protection, and I would say education, because that's a very critical issue. Consumers cannot protect themselves if they are uneducated about the space they're stepping into. And we saw some of the positives, but there are also concerns about the negatives as well. So what do you think the potential impact of this move from the CBN is?
Well, the initial impact is obviously there's some sort of excitement, back in the space. We feel that, there is some relevance being given to virtual asset services providers like ourselves. So yes, we're excited about that, but we're also cautiously optimistic in how we move forward. Yes, financial inclusion will be a good thing, but we as a company, the onus is on us to provide some sort of education. And again, this space, digital assets, if you like, the distributed ledger technology, the blockchain of itself. All these points can seem very, very complex, but there's also the approach of making things easier for the consumer, and we've been able to do that. We've massively simplified our platform, so users can have access to things like stable coins to store their naira value, for example, and in so doing, we'll be able to assist the central bank, with the proliferation of the US dollar, if you like, the digital dollar, which will ultimately result in, a higher demand for naira, right? So these are some of the more advanced conversations that I expect us to have, hopefully with the central bank, and how we can assist them in breathing more life back into the Nigerian naira and giving it the value I think it should have, and perhaps getting us to that position where there'll be a singular rate for the naira, as opposed to having in sort of different markets, which we currently do. So there are some benefits in that space. A lot of what we've done, we can't speak for everyone, but again, a lot of what we've done, we believe other companies are doing the same, is we are following that model. We have got an AML policy. We have got a counter-terrorist financing policy. We KYC, or register all our users. We make sure we know who they are before we give them access. We have tiered access, which means we can limit the amount of volume or value of digital assets you can hold. Again, this is the consumer protection, which I believe everyone's after. So there are a number of bits and pieces that we have in place, which I believe will actually help the central bank's bottom line, but at the same time, give the education, the access, to the users in such a way that they're not overwhelmed, or they're not in a position whereby, there's loss, whereby, there's, issues with what we call the investment grade crypto, things like Bitcoin or Ethereum, if you will, which, are quite volatile in their price movements. So, I mean, yeah, I think there are a number of things, again, given the maturity in this space now, given the amount of time, that we've spent, working on our solutions and the problems we're looking to solve, we feel that we're now in a position to provide a robust service. We can assist the central authorities with what they wish to achieve. At the same time, keep it safe, for the consumers.
Okay. And you mentioned stable coins, and I know there's a collaboration or indications that some kind of collaboration may be happening between Nigerian banks and fintechs to develop and manage a CNGN, a new stable coin. Ola, I don't know if you've heard about this. What's your take on it? How would this be different from the e-naira? How does it add to the conversation around digital assets that's happening in Nigeria and even beyond?
Yeah, so I mean, a stable coin in essence just makes it easier for you to store value of a currency or fiat, normal currency, in a digital asset, which you can then store in a DLT. But ultimately, the value, I believe, for the CNGN is going to be privately managed. So I think people may be, perhaps more open to using the CNGN as opposed to the e-naira, which, was pretty much DOA. So I think the view would be going forward, Nigeria will embark on, I think, what is this journey, which is already started, if you like, of a cashless society. And the CNGN, being a stable coin, could be accepted by traders and companies and corporates alike as a means of, exchange of value, or indeed for purchasing goods and services. So I think this is sort of, the next step along the way of, can I send you CNGN for goods and services? I can receive CNGN for goods and services, not too dissimilar to the services that we already provide currently, whether it's a dollar, a based stablecoin in things like USDT and USDC, or whether it's now going to be a naira-based, stablecoin. Ultimately, it's a means of transfer of value. and it will allow traders. It will permit corporates, institutions to offer services and buy goods and services, if you like, from each other, and have that sort of more instantaneous transaction process. So yes, there is a lot of benefits in the fintechs and the banks sort of coming together to provide such a service. So we're certainly excited about the prospects of CNGN, and of course we will be more than pleased to make CNGN available on our platform, so Nigerians of all walks can have access to to move value from one another, and of course use it to buy goods and services, which I think is the way we're going.
So it seems like the movement around digital assets in 2024 is going to be a very interesting one. Ola, before I let you go, just very quickly, for those considering cryptocurrency or digital assets as an investment instrument, just quickly run us through some of the risks and benefits associated with dealing with this, not particularly necessarily to your own platform, but just a general sense. Let's use the last 1 minute or so as an opportunity to educate those who are looking at this, particularly with the CBN's recent action.
Yes, I think the knee-jerk reaction should be everybody. So the CBN's raised, removed the restriction. So let's now jump into crypto. I think there's still going to be a need there's still a need, if you like, for caution. I think we should all do our homework with regards to where we put our money. There's a lot of education out there in terms of what people need to know about cryptocurrencies. The risks involved, how to get involved, how not to get involved, where to go for information, and how to ensure, the risk of scams or, phishing scams, if you like, are avoided. So there are a number of ways this can be done. We advise people to visit our website at KoinKoin.io and reach out to us directly, and we're more than pleased to assist with education and offer advice on how to best get involved in investing in cryptocurrencies.
All right, so Ola Atose, CEO, KoinKoin Exchange, thank you so much for your time today. And once again, Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. So Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you.
And one of the things that's noted in that CBN circular, if I could get it back on the screen now, is about, of course, the concerns the CBN does have also about consumer protection as well, and protection measures. So they've noted that current trends are globally showing that there is a need to regulate the activities of virtual asset service providers. They're also, of course, following the developments from the Financial Action Task Force. That's something we've spoken about in this past year, which updated its own recommendations to require VASP to be regulated to prevent misuse of virtual assets for money laundering, terrorism financing, and the like. But what we do know is that the CBN has issued the guidelines to provide guidance to financial institutions under its regulatory purview in respect of the banking relationship with VASP in Nigeria. So this is superseding previous circulars from the Central Bank of Nigeria. But at the final bottom, you're noting, however, banks and financial institutions, as well as others, are still prohibited from transacting in cryptocurrencies. At the end of the day, we must ensure consumer protection, education, and advocacy so that people do not find themselves on the wrong side of this development. You're watching Business Edge. When we come back, we have international business headlines. And after that, we're going to be looking at the year that was. Stay with us.